right, welcome back to Tiger Bytes. Today we are with David Hinson, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies in the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here.
So, before we talk about your course, I want to talk about your Associate Dean role. What do you think, for the typical faculty member like me, what do you think would be some of the misconceptions or misperceptions that faculty have of somebody who's working in an administration?
Well, yeah, I've been. I'm in my 28th year here at Auburn, and I've spent a little over close to half of that time in administrative roles and half of it in kind of full-time teaching roles. I think that I will say the part I like the most about being an ADR is that it's really, in my view, I'm associate dean for enabling because it's a support role, right? It's about trying to understand what our faculty's interests are and then trying to position them and support them to really move those research interests forward. And I love that job. It's really a lot of fun. And I think, I think if, as a faculty member, I don't think I always saw administrators as there to help me every day.
Right.
But that's definitely the way I view my job and why I enjoy it so much.
Do you have doctoral programs in your college?
We have one in the building construction field. Our college is organized as 3 schools.
Right.
Construction management, or building science, as we call it here at Auburn, is one of those schools, and we have a doctoral program there.
What sort of places do those doctoral students end up working after they finish with us?
They're primarily headed towards teaching roles in construction. Many of them come into that program with academic backgrounds in construction or design or engineering. So they may return to those fields after their doctorate in the program, but I think they're generally focused on kind of a teaching career.
Gotcha. And that must be really rewarding when you see those folks getting an academic job and going out and being successful.
For sure. Our program is young. We are about to on the cusp of awarding our kind of second, third, and fourth PhD in the program. So it's also rewarding to see those programs grow up. The bulk of our graduate students in our college are master's level students. So we have 3 master's programs: one in construction, one in landscape architecture, and one in industrial design, as well as 2 executive format programs, one in construction, and then our partnership with the College of Business, which is the Masters of Real Estate Development program.
Right, which award-winning program.
That's right. It's a really successful program.
Well, let's talk about your course on professional practice.
Sure.
And you had to make some major adjustments to it because of the pandemic. So that's probably a pretty good place to start.
Sure.
How did COVID rock your world, and how did you rock it back?
Sure. Well, like I've taught this course for most of my teaching career, which began back in the early 90s when I was in Philadelphia working as a practicing architect and teaching as an adjunct at Temple University. So been teaching this topic for a long, long time. And like most of my colleagues in my college, and I would suspect at the university, I approached the teaching of that topic the same way I was taught, which was the kind of traditional lecture-based model, the stand and deliver kind of approach.
Right.
And like for all of us, sort of COVID forced us, ready or not, into teaching via other technologies, other modes of engagement with our students. And most of that, it was kind of a rough transition. A lot of things that I think I didn't like about it. A lot of things I'm sure that others felt the same way. But I quickly found there were some opportunities there that I had not been as open to or understood as well as I did after I came out of that whatever that length of period, sort of 18, 24 months
Right.
of engaging with these technologies were. And so as we sort of got back into normal teaching mode, I really felt like, okay, I need to take advantage of this information, this knowledge while it's fresh in my mind, and um, reached out to the team at the Big EO Center, which was certainly the best step in my process because they were wonderful to work with in terms of developing this new course. And helped me to understand how to, leverage the sort of toe in the water exposure I got from the COVID time, into a much more intentional, robust platform for utilizing these technologies in this course.
And one of the themes that's emerging as we bring people in and talk to them about cutting edge teaching practices is, of course, everybody hated COVID,
Right.
except those people who would go up on the interstate and do 130 because they knew there were no police around. They
They
enjoyed
liked it,
COVID, but the
right.
rest of us, not so much. But it really forced us as instructors to sort of get out of our comfort zone. And I did this as well, and experiment with different ways of doing things.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just sort of an interesting, I think, human phenomenon that we'll just sort of go through life doing what we've always done until we're really forced to
Yep.
do something differently.
A big disruptor comes into our lives. And I think that in our discipline, I think this is probably true of a lot of disciplines here at Auburn. The subject matter, we're professional programs. We're preparing students for lives as professionals. We can simulate some of that in the classroom. I think we do a pretty good job with that. But a lot of that learning is more impactful if the students can contextualize it in the setting that they're going to be pursuing as professionals. And one of the things that the kind of COVID experience opened up for me was, how do we use these technologies to better engage with practitioners outside the campus? How do we bring them into the learning experience of our students? A lot of architecture programs are based in urban centers.
Sure.
Auburn's not.
Right.
So that meant that, when we wanted to have practicing architects come into the classroom, we had to facilitate them traveling to campus and
Right.
kind of all of the logistics associated with that, which we did a lot, but the logistics were the constraint. The technologies we used in Zoom suddenly kicked that door wide open, and that's one example of where I learned something that I was then able to build around in this new course design.
Mhm. And so all of a sudden you could have an architect based in Bangkok as a guest speaker
Absolutely.
using this
Yeah.
technology.
Or partner my students with an architect in Bangkok, or an architect in Philadelphia or New Orleans, well beyond the travel radius of we would normally think about kind of pre-COVID engaging with practitioners.
Right. What do you think are the most common misconceptions architecture students have about the professional practice course, and how do you try to address them?
The kind of cultural center of architecture school is the design studio. That's where our students sort of hone their visual thinking, visual communication, design thinking skills. It's very much the kind of master value core place of our curriculum. And one of the habits that kind of develops in students is they think about everything else as being ancillary and secondary to the skill set they use in studio. So one of my challenges, or one of the challenges I've taken on, is trying to convince those design students that their approach to the way they would structure a practice, a business around architecture, needs to be approached with the same creativity, the same critical thinking, the same design culture that they bring to designing projects. It's very much about designing processes, and you can be just as creative there as you can in the design studio.
So, as you've seen multiple cycles of students take your redesigned course, what sort of shifts have you noticed in their approach to architectural practice? And are there new areas that you're considering adding to the curriculum?
A couple of kind of real tangible, measurable things. The students appear to be retaining and understanding the content better, at least reflected in the scores on the assessments that are built into the
Right.
course. That's been a steady climb over the sort of 3 cycles of utilizing this new approach. They seem excited about the opportunity to connect. Many of them have had professional internships during the summer before they get to my class. And this is a venue where suddenly they're tapping into what they experienced there and using that kind of learned experience in the classroom in a way that I don't think they're necessarily challenged to do as directly in other parts of our curriculum, and they love that. The discussions we have in class are much more animated now than they were before. I think those are a sort of a key challenge, a key positive outcome of this new approach. In terms of new areas, I think it takes me more than 3 cycles of trying something new to really get good at it, right? What is it? The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of practice, right, before you get really good at it. So I'm still learning how to utilize the classroom under this new model, how to leverage this structure to its optimal kind of level. And I think, again, that's where I'm getting help from the Big EO team is how to design active learning into the classroom, engagement with students in a way that optimizes the model. And I kind of get better with a little bit better at it with each cycle. Try some things, some work, some don't. But that also, quite honestly, is makes my experience as the instructor a whole lot more fun because I feel like I'm growing and learning as a teacher in a way that I'm not sure I would have said I felt like I was growing and learning as a teacher prior to this experience.
So students can be a little reluctant to change just like faculty are. Did you run into any challenges with students being like, wait a minute, I'm used to chalk talk here. I don't necessarily know about this approach.
The positive side of this is that I think, as I said before, students really kind of sit up when they see they've got an opportunity to connect the dots between experiences they've had. So that's great. But to be candid, this model asks a lot more of students than a more passive learning approach does, right? If I can just sit through the lecture, not have to really engage much in the classroom, read the required readings, and do well in the course, we've conditioned students in a way to think that's how you learn. And while I've been very pleased with their responsiveness to this new model, I'm very conscious that I'm asking a lot more of them than maybe they're used to being asked to do in a class like this. To completely leverage this model, the students have to be working on multiple planes, right? They have to be engaged with the online material. They have to be engaged in the classroom, and they have to be engaged in what I call the interview assignment that's a complement to those two things. And it really is like a 3-dimensional chess game in a way, right? They have to be paying attention to more than one schedule in real time throughout the whole course. There's not this kind of start off with a lot of energy, get to the midterm, put a lot of energy in, get to the final, put a lot of energy in. They have to sustain a level of engagement for 15 weeks. And that asks a lot of them.
It is asking a lot.
Yeah.
Before we came on, you were talking about the interview aspect,
Sure.
which I'd love for folks to hear more about that.
That is, I think, the third leg of the stool in this course design, right? There's the robust online platform. We took basically everything that I used to do in PowerPoints and moved it into an online format, which opens up the time that I spend in the classroom with them. I don't have to represent that material. But the complementary piece is this interview assignment. So the students are paired up, they work in teams, and they're paired up with the principals of architecture practices all over the region, and by virtue of the distance technology all over the country. And over the course of the semester, as we move into a new module, we will cover that content in class. We will have, and in that same time frame, the students have an assignment to interview the principal that they're paired and partnered with about that, how the firm approaches that topic, and then we use class time to debrief on those interviews, right? And it's I have about 65 to 70 students in the class, so we may have 15 plus teams, 15 different firms engaged with the students. So the in-class discussions become this kind of share and compare moment where a student team A that may be working with a big firm, let's say in Atlanta, gets to hear how student team H engaged with a two-person practice in Louisiana
Right.
on that same topic, right? And so they get to hear what's common across those different types of firms and what's different. And that I think is really makes for some enriched learning experience for those students.
Excellent. Given the experience you've gone through and continue to go through with revamping this course in turning it three-dimensional, as you put it, what sort of advice would you give to other educators, or maybe a little bit hesitant to go beyond their traditional lecture-based teaching and be a little more innovative?
I think people often start answers to that question with, "Well, be prepared. It's a lot more work." But I would say it's also a lot more fun.
Yeah.
I think the mental, the kind of design challenge of figuring out how to do this well is, I've really enjoyed that. And the discussions with the students that I have, I feel much more like a kind of learning partner with my students as opposed to just a deliverer of information.
Right.
That's just a lot more fun. Admittedly, it is particularly the designing the course, building the course in this model is a lot of work. I would say don't try to do this without professional help, and
Right.
that's where the Big EO team was so valuable to me. And don't underestimate how much time, the kind of calendar time it takes to do this, because the funny part about this story for me is that when I first reached out, Dr. Ali said, "This is great. We'd love to work with you. We think it's going to take you about 9 months to prepare the cycle." And I said, "No, I don't have 9 months. I got to do it in 6." And he said, "Are you sure?" And so we launched in and did it. And the team, Chandra Bowers, was just phenomenal to work with, and
Right.
And put in heroic amount of time to try to meet my unrealistic schedule. And we did a really good job, but it was clear that after that first round, we needed to go back and refine that process. So in the end, it ended up taking probably a little bit longer even than I'd been advised it would take, because I was trying to rush it in the beginning. I think I would say kind of give yourself time. Don't underestimate, because it's not just the doing. When you're redesigning a course, you have to actually stop and think about, okay, I'm not gonna do the same things I've been used to doing. And Chandra was wonderful in kind of coaching me through how to think about that.
Right.
And that created a kind of a feedback loop then that said, okay, well, if I'm going to do it that way, then I need to organize the material a little bit differently.
It's definitely a lot of work up front. I've done a couple of these courses, but I feel like it pays off over time. So you mentioned putting your PowerPoints online. That means every time you teach the course, you don't have to do
Oh,
that
absolutely.
lecture. You can spend it on interactive time with the students, which to me is a lot less exhausting
Yeah, oh,
than
yeah, for sure.
putting on a show.
For sure. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And one of the things that we worked on really in the first couple of cycles was trying to find the sweet spot between content that I needed to reinforce via kind of a lecture in the classroom versus content where the online material was sufficient and I could really loosen up and use my class time differently with the
Right.
students. And still trying to find the perfect balance there. I think I'll always will be, but that takes time as well. I think by the third round of this, we're really starting to fire on all cylinders relative to the potential of the course.
I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I think in a lot of people's minds, when they think about online learning, it's okay, I used to do everything in the classroom and now I'm going to do everything online.
Mm,
But there's this big middle ground of hybrid
that's
formats
right.
that just creates a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of you can put things online that students can go back and revisit as many times as they want. I don't mind if they watch my videos on double speed the second time around. I'm perfectly okay
Right,
with that.
right, right, right.
And then use the class time for interactive type things where you can really have more of a mentoring role.
That absolutely true. The other interesting thing is a lot of the content of this class is content that these students will have to be they will be tested on in the licensing exam.
Mm,
And so the other advantage of the online platform, I think, is, and this is something I'm working with the Big EO team on, is I actually can have a resource that's kind of evergreen for those students, and they can come back and access it again
right.
after graduation, even, I'd like to say, as they prepare for those licensing exams, because this is a lot. I think a much richer prep experience to go back and review
Yeah.
this material again before they take the exam.
Is that the type of exam where previous exams are available as study aids?
There are lots of study aids. In theory, they're like
Mm,
test. You can take a kind of a
right.
test quiz
Right.
and things like that. I think a lot of the source material we use in this course is the same source material they'll use to study for the exam. So
Gotcha.
it's a good. I've had a lot of students say, "Hey, okay, this was great. I enjoyed this. I want to be able to come back and
Right.
utilize this
Right.
platform again." So I think that's speaks to your observation that these platforms have life beyond the semester that you deliver the course. And I think that's a great thing.
And I think that's something universities in general are struggling with. How can we take an alum and turn them into a lifelong learner, where they continue to engage with the university and, oh, by the way, hopefully send us $1 or 2 along the
That's
way.
right. That's right. And another interesting opportunity that we found when we designing this course is, back to the idea that a lot of the subject matter, students will retain it better if you can contextualize the learning. So one of the things we've done is engaged alums to be interviewed
Mm,
and about, okay, well, how are you approaching this topic? And then we embed those interviews into the course platform. So, again, even beyond the interview project piece of it, we're engaging with practitioners, folding that content into the course, but also that engagement with the practitioners is a positive thing because they feel now they've contributed in a positive way to the classroom, and they have.
right.
And that sort of loop of giving back, contributing your wisdom and experience back into the classroom is something that's very satisfying for our alums, as I'm sure it probably would be for others across the university.
So before we wrap up, I have to ask you some questions about architecture.
Sure, my pleasure.
And in particular, Auburn's campus. Do you have a favorite building and a least favorite building from an architectural
Mm.
perspective?
Oh boy. I have lots of favorite buildings. I think that and favorite spaces. I think part of the
Mm,
thing where I think like the Mel Atrium is a fabulous space, right? It's
amazing.
one of the most popular
Yeah.
spaces on campus. When I ask my students to list their favorite spaces on campus, it's always, at or near the top. Um, Another great example, I think, of what the campus could do more of is illustrated by the business graduate building,
Mm,
uh,
I was
and
going to ask you
and
about that.
specifically the relationship between the lobby and that courtyard space. That level of transparency that
Hmm.
happens at the ground level of the building. I think we ought to do more of that on campus. Less object buildings surrounded by and closed off from the outdoors, but to buildings that actually kind of open up and engage the outdoors a little bit more.
Before you leave Triple H, let me ask you about that building. That's sort of a hot style, steel, concrete, lots of glass.
Mm.
Do you think in 20, 30, 40 years that building will still be viewed as attractive, or will it be looked at the way we look at, avocado colored appliances?
Yeah, I think that building is going to age very well. I think in part because of the way the things like the way the kind of inside-outside connections that we were talking about earlier, the nature of that sort of atrium lobby space, like the Mel atrium here, like the I'm sorry, not the Gavin, the Brown Copel kind of lobby space. Students, those are the buildings of the future for our campus, is spaces like that where students have multiple opportunities to not just sit and study, kind of with blinders on, but engage with each other, these kind of multifunction spaces that are built around collaboration and engagement that are not closed off classroom buildings or faculty offices. We need more of those kinds of spaces on campus.
That was actually a big priority with the second business building because Louder Hall, there's almost no places for
corridors.
students to gather.
It's all corridors, yeah.
And you'd see them sitting on the floor,
absolutely,
having conversations.
Yeah.
And so they were very intentional.
I mean, I think that's been one of the best things that happened to this campus in the last 20 years is, we have those. I think the student center was kind of I'm not sure I would say it's the first step, but it was a really important step in embracing those types of spaces and see how popular they are with students, right? And now we've got Mel, we've got the graduate business building, we've got the Brown Copel. More of those spaces I think will be critical to the future of our campus. And I think all of those buildings will age well. Whether the architectural language feels current or not, I think they'll be beloved buildings because of those features.
Speaking of beloved buildings, the Haley Center takes a lot of heat in terms of
yes, it does.
Appearance and architecture. You have any thoughts on what should be done there? Should they tear it down and start over, or is it fixable?
Haley is a kind of an interesting example. I don't think there's an Auburn alum who doesn't have a Haley Center story as part of their.
It probably involves getting lost.
It always involves getting lost. I think there's some, as I understand it, I know that the university's done several studies, about to probably embark on a new round of this, and trying to envision how to modify and repurpose that massive kind of in-place resource.
Right.
One of the things that we know about kind of the principles of sustainability is that if you can repurpose an existing building, that's a much lower kind of carbon impact than building a new building. So you always want to try to repurpose if you can. And I think there's potential to repurpose that, the sort of 4 classroom pods. I think that the tower presents actually a little bit more of a challenge because it's there are things like floor-to-floor heights and the systems inside the building that present a little bit more of a technical challenge to repurpose. I think we would, but if you imagine taking those buildings back to their skeleton, the kind of structural frame, if you could open up the 4 classroom quadrants to more natural light,
right,
you wouldn't get lost, right? The reason you get lost is you can't see out.
Disoriented.
You're disoriented, right? So I think opening those pods up, opening the skin of those modules up to a little bit more transparency. We're not going to take that building and turn it into a neo-Georgian, traditional looking thing. We shouldn't even think about doing that. I think we've got to accept that it's a contemporary building, use that as an opportunity to use everything we've learned in the 6 or 7 decades since that building was built about how to make these kinds of buildings work better. And I think there's something we can do with that.
Well, David, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I know that our viewers will really enjoy hearing your thoughts on not only teaching architecture, but real-world architecture as well.
Fantastic. I've really enjoyed the experience. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Tiger Bytes. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained some valuable insights. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. You can find us on all major platforms. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time on Tiger Bytes.